Linda Stevenson, who is going to be our first presenter. And Linda Stevenson joined the International Relations team of the Political Science Department at Westchester University in 2002. Her primary areas of teaching and research specialization are in comparative politics and international relations, with a focus in the region of Latin America on topics related to democracy, equality, development, and gender politics. In the 1980s, Dr. Stevenson traveled to Haiti, Kenya, and the former Soviet Union, and Mexico for short periods, but long enough to observe and formulate questions about poverty, inequality, and how transitions to democracy may occur. These questions and the myriad of answers continue to drive her as a global citizen and as a political scientist. And she says, on a personal note, Dr. Stevenson grew up in suburban Philadelphia and is married to a Latin American and has 2 sons. And welcome, Dr. Stevenson, and we look forward to your presentation on home care associates.
Thank you very much. So you save your applause. Hi, everyone. It's so funny when you hear a bio about yourself that you wrote a long time ago and you go, oh, okay. So I am going to do my best to keep you all entertained, as I know that this is an hour when many of us begin to fade. And we're a little short on time, so I will be brief. I also want to let you all know that the CEO of Home Care Associates is in the audience. And so she may very well be better the person to answer some of the questions about the organization than I, because most of my information is based on an interview with her. So, Karen, thank you so much for coming today. All right. Basically, I just want to let you know what Home Care Associates is. Home Care Associates, or I call it HCA from here forward, was founded on the belief that in order to provide quality care, home care workers must have quality jobs, training, and support. And what the training and support is for the quality jobs is in health and home care aides, right? So to this end, HCA is organized as an employee-owned cooperative controlled by home health aides. Over 95% of HCA's workers are female, 92% African American, 4% Latino, and the rest of other ethnicities. So you can see that there's a definite story to be told in terms of what we've been hearing in terms of gender and race and that relation in Philadelphia. Approximately 75% of HCA's aides also have been or are able to get off of welfare when they successfully become trained and become a worker in the HCA. So in terms also of a subline in the story of HCA and the success in Philadelphia is kind of buys into the model of that conservatives and liberals alike have been trying to push forward of how do we get people off of welfare and into work. So some of the motivation initially to get this organization moving was precisely to do that, but with the twist of not only getting African-American women mostly off of the dole, but into good work, decent work, as the International Labor Organization would call it, and also into an empowering mentality, which you've heard a lot about today. I won't go into detail about that. It's in the paper if you'd like to read more. But it's kind of like in Latin America, they call it conscientization, right? A conscientization process that kind of is the part of the education that we've been hearing about all day, of a mindset that opens you up to thinking about being an owner of the company instead of just a worker and going to work and maybe, have a decent pay and decent wages, but more than that, right? So that's part of what the cooperative side of HCA is doing with this particular population. Why is this mission important? And again, I apologize that this is what I tell my students not to do, lots of text on a page, but in lieu of better images and such, please stick with me. So imagine ourselves, 20, 30, 40 years down the road, or perhaps your parents or your grandparents at present, with perhaps some increasing needs, or as a disabled person, maybe you already are experiencing some of the needs that come with having physical challenges, mental challenges. As you know, the state of Pennsylvania, in the nation, this is a huge set of issues. If you've seen any of the demographic census information, you know about that the pyramid, the upside down thing, right, where the boom is going to happen in the later years, in the very near future. So HCA, a very important part of its mission is to provide services to this growing population. Few statistics about how this population is growing in Pennsylvania and then in Philadelphia. I won't read it all because I think you guys can, but you can see that it is an urgent issue in this state and in the city of Philadelphia in particular, as it's known for having an older population. Okay, so that's part of the urgency of the mission in terms of the clientele. At the same time, on the flip side, let me go back. There should be another slide in here, but the urgency of creating workers, particularly African American women, and moving from what is a traditional gender role, right, of caregiving. Many of women who are going to have a family or are a daughter, maybe you don't even have your own kids, but you're a daughter, you're going to be caregiving at some point, and oftentimes this is a segregated role that women are going to do more than men, for better or worse. I'm in that role myself right now, and for some reason I'm better at it than my brothers. I don't know why. But since that is also a demand that many of us do, many people think it's just something that gets done, right? It's families take care, you step up, right? And often there's pressures to do that and not think about the pay, the hours, the quality of care that is given, right? You hear about it all the time in the press, okay? Some poor senior person or disabled person who's abused, and this terrible caregiver worker who probably was working 16-hour days and, forgot to give them the right meds or whatever. So in those terms, it's not to belittle the stories that are tragic and terrible, but there's a lot of space for the need for decent work, right? For good wages, for benefits, so that if you get good at it, okay, because not everyone's a good caregiver, if you get good at it, to be able to stay with it for some time, right? So that's part of also what the mission of HCA is doing with the workers, is to have a higher demand for training. For example, HCA, in the initial training process of workers coming into the organization, requires 150 hours of service as opposed to the minimum that's required of 40 for home health aides to get out and do their business. And then they have workers really connected to the organization by coming back in over the course of the year, 5 or 6 different trainings. So it's kind of like a continuing ed program, if you will, because there's always new things to learn, ways to do things better, ways to become more efficient, more compassionate when you're having your own issues, that we can all learn, and they include it. So that's part of, in terms of the mission of HCA, the dual side that it affects. Challenges for HCA. Some of these go right into some of the political issues that have come up in the last 15 years and very recently. I'm just going to mention 2. In 1997, the passage of the Federal Balanced Budget Act had a really serious impact in terms of changing the structure of how healthcare works, how Medicare was going to work, how workers and welfare were supposed to work. And that definitely had a jolt in the worker and in the client side of HCA. That in the HCA began in 1993, and so it was it had come through the initial kind of 5-year trial period, of what some organizations survive or don't in that period. But this was a big challenge to overcome. Part of the way that was covered or addressed by the organization was a change in leadership. The CEO switched, and the strengths of the founder were much more about initiating and connecting and doing some of the affinity kind of trust building pieces that the keynote speaker was just speaking about. Whereas now it was time to move in a more of a business direction and do the other parts that the mayor was talking about in terms of finance and management, right? So the second CEO who came in at HCA that was her strength, and she did in fact help the organization to overcome some of those issues that were challenges in terms of accommodating to the new regulations. However, culturally, she wasn't exactly the cooperative type. So it was a tricky thing, and culturally she had not had much experience with the majority population in HCA, the African American women. So it was difficult. And then the current CEO came in, who has quite a background in understanding of empowering women, from a background in movements, in women's movements, and running a rape crisis center in the 1980s, then getting into supporting female representatives in campaigns and politics in the 1990s, and management all along. So her affinity to the organization was pretty good. And she came in, became, as a consultant, became the CEO in 2002, and has continued on with some great success in this last decade. The more recent challenge has been what many of us are aware of, and Wisconsin probably has it worse than we do right now, the governor, okay, and some of the politicalization of privatization and public funding cuts that's going on, that many of us are a part of. I teach at a state university. I teach at Westchester, and this is a set of discussions that we've had nonstop for the last 4 years. So it's affecting people in all of the different sectors we're talking about. Health and home care has not been spared. While cuts in Medicaid, public welfare assistance agencies, Medicare changes in the regulations have really changed what clients are able to manage, as well then as what the organization has to shift to accommodate to those new situations. So a big challenge in a very real way was, in terms of the cooperative side, the dividend side of what the cooperative offers, was that in 2011, there was not enough profit to have the dividend that they had for the previous 8 years. And although that was hard, and the workers, of course, are not exactly pleased that would happen, there was understanding, because I believe of the building and the taking the time and the training and the education about, we're a cooperative. We work together. We're going to get through this together, right? And that's part of what the attitude was at the end of that holiday party, rather than being, mad that you weren't going to have a little more for your holidays. Rather, it was an affirmation that, yeah, it's a tough year. We're just going to move on. The benefits of the cooperative, real briefly, a couple more statistics about the organization. It employs 175 workers, about half of whom are members of the cooperative. So unlike some of the other cooperatives you've been hearing about, this is a opt-in kind of choice. It can be something that women, the workers in the situation, may gradually opt into, or as they come to trust the organization more, or find that the wages are sustainable and the benefits are working for them, then they like what they see and they continue on. You can see some of the rest of those benefits. I don't have much time to go through. The HCA board is made up of 12 members, as many have talked about governance today. 7 of those are worker owners, and 5 are outside members, some of whom are members or leadership in other related, similar caregiving cooperatives. Conclusions and prospects. So, as I already mentioned, this burgeoning demand, for trustworthy, highly trained, dependable health home aides, which might sound almost like an oxymoron, given the kind of media that health home aides get. The difference between what HCA does and how they expand or don't, and the difference between the quality that this kind of workers have or believe that they should have, can be the difference in this situation between life and death, right? To be really blunt. So HCA's philosophy of quality care through quality jobs, I see, and from what I understand thus far of the organization, is really an excellent solution to some of these really huge issues in this occupation, right? Better pay, wages, better fair wages, decent benefits, support systems that help prevent burnout and unnecessary turnover, and then better customer satisfaction and worker satisfaction as a result. So I'll leave it at that. I welcome your questions when we finish up. Thanks.
Next, I'd like to welcome up School of Social Policy and Practice. Dr. Kondo studies the socio-spatial dimensions of race, gender, and class inequality within systems of urban planning, policy making, infrastructure development, and environmental management as barriers to community and environmental health and well-being. She is currently pursuing community participatory projects relating to environmental justice and hazardous air pollutants in the Port Richmond and South Philadelphia neighborhoods of Philadelphia. And Dr. Kondo will be doing a case study of child space.
Hello. As well, we are lucky to have one of the founders of Child Space here present in the audience, so Teresa. So I'm looking forward to the discussion at the end, and it'll be helpful to have you here. So Child Space it was founded in 1988, and I think the story goes there were 3 moms in the Mount Airy neighborhood of Philadelphia, and I'll have a map up in a few minutes, who wanted ready to go back to work, but found that, like many parents these days, there's a lack of quality, affordable childcare, and some really atrocious kind of working conditions for those that were and are, that work in the childcare industry. And so decided to do something about it. And they were motivated as potential clients of a child care facility, but also as potential workers. They wanted to create an organization or that they would like to work themselves to work in and help take part in shaping and developing. So this group of women, they started an in-home child care facility, and soon found that was not sustainable, and moved into a larger space in, I believe it was, still in Mount Airy, and started to build from there. There were 2 basic premises, and they decided to use this cooperative model. 2 of these women were familiar with the cooperative model from previous, their own previous experience. So they started off with 2 basic rules, and one that staff can become members of the co-op after 1 year of working at Child Space. And that the members must pay a one-time membership fee to kind of ensure investment in the organization, and currently it's about $250. So I'm going to give you a little bit of history on this organization and explain some of the unique characteristics of its kind of structure. So again, this Mount Airy Daycare Center started off in 1988. 1992, through a series of grants, they have been able to expand to build additional and develop additional child care centers. 1992, one in Germantown neighborhood. And in 1999, Child Space West in West Philadelphia. I guess I will go ahead and show you a map of where these are. So you can see here the city outline's not so great, but so kind of concentrated in the western section of the city. And so these child care centers then there are 3 child care centers, and so they just provide child care. In 1995, they also decided to develop an organization, Child Space Cooperative Development, Inc., or CCDI, to help, initially it was designed to replicate this model, and at first they were looking across on the West Coast in California. We're working with a group to try to help replicate the Child Space model. But found, I think, after a few years that it was really, really a challenge and a struggle to replicate from such a long distance, and decided more to focus on training, providing technical assistance, and training to other child care workers and owners, child care centers, here in Philadelphia, and that currently is what they do, as well as policy advocacy and organizing. So let me move on to show you this this organizational flow chart. So we have the Child Space Management Group, which I'm just calling Child Space, but that is actually it's a for-profit organization. That is the co-op, and that organization, the cooperative employs all of the workers at the child care centers and at CCDI. So through management contracts, it provides the staff for all of the three three child care centers and for CCDI. So very much like the model that Dr. Swack was talking about, the CCA Global Partners, is that right? Yes, but on a local scale, and very successful one. So here we are, and it started back in 1988. I don't know, when did CCA start, I wonder? Who was first? It provides staff, provides payroll, insurance, grant writing, and other business management services to these child care centers and CCDI. Services or things that individual child care centers might not necessarily be able to do on their own and make it, right? Child Space employs 70 workers, and 20 of those workers are cooperative members or worker owners. And again, co-op membership entails a one-time membership fee, and members must serve on its board, on the management group board, and at least one committee. So there's a finance committee, a personnel committee, and bylaws committee. These committees set policy that the child care centers and CCDI operate by. Committee decisions are made by these worker members by consensus vote, one vote per person, and members must attend monthly meetings for both committees and for the larger co-op board. And members are, I think that members in their first year are required to serve on the finance committee so that they are kind of initiated and become familiar with the finances of this broader organization. Non-member staff in many ways receive kind of some of the same benefits that I think that members receive, and there are many benefits of working at this or one of these centers or with this organization or set of organizations. I'll call it a group, especially from the perspective of working in the child care industry. First of all, fair wages that are higher than the industry standard, health benefits for even part-time workers down to those who work 15 hours per week, which is pretty much unheard of, I think, these days. Paid sick days, paid vacation time, and seasonal job security, which is a really important one, especially in the child care industry. As enrollment fluctuates seasonally, child care centers often are, cutting people, on a monthly basis. So this huge problem of turnover, and we don't see that here. Staff are welcome to attend some of the non-finance related board and committee meetings and voice their concerns, and have been influential in setting policy as well. Let's see. So I asked in my interviews, I asked, what are some of the best practices, and what are your challenges as well? And I think this triad structure, this structure here is really very important, and has allowed this group to sustain itself and to build and develop. And I think that it is being successful, and I hope and we'll see develop even further, right? And it helps having both nonprofit and for-profit arms here. Notice so that it broadens opportunities for grant application. Each child care center, for example, can't afford to pay for the administrative and business management services that are necessary. Other kind of best practices, the method of decision making is I think very, very important. That as we talked about, Dr. Gordon Nembard was mentioning the practice of democracy, the actual practice, paying attention to those details. How do you involve everyone in making decisions? And something that they try to do is really lower the barriers to participation for a lot of these, and mostly women working at this organization. So they hold meetings during work hours. So the meeting time is paid, it's covered, and it's if it's not, then they might provide childcare and food, and to try to incentivize people to come. Let's see. I think that I heard a lot about that. One benefit that co-op membership offers, and this may be universal, is the sense of autonomy and kind of thinking and acting beyond your own personal interests, and removing this barrier between us as employees and them as managers. That is very important, but it also takes a while and takes some years for staff or worker owners to kind of get that mindset down and realize that if you see a problem, you don't, the employee response is, well, it's not my role, I don't have to do this, I don't have to fix it or clean it up, someone else should take care of it. Well, no, actually, I own this, company or group. I should either clean it up myself, or I should, take it to a committee. At the same time, there are a lot of challenges associated with removing this boundary between worker and owner. For one, it's hard to motivate staff to become worker owners in the first place. That's one challenge. So creating incentives is one kind of area that they work on. And sometimes these interests clash in terms of, oh, I wish I had higher pay. Oh, wait, I know if we gave ourselves raises, then we would have to cut programs or something like this. Motivating members to take leadership positions on committees and in work groups to go kind of a step beyond baseline attendance at group meetings is also a challenge, whereas, in organizations like this, kind of the vibrancy of the organization is based on, whether and how, to what extent employees take or owners take leadership positions. So just in conclusion, I think that ChildSpace does a really amazing job of providing the essential service of quality childcare and affordable childcare, and providing the essential kind of positive working conditions, job stability, living wage, healthcare, and other benefits to childcare workers. And so replicating this model on a local or regional level, within this and similar industries, I think kind of should be a goal for cooperative endeavors. Thank you.
Great, and so at this point we'll hear from Ann Reynolds talking about cooperative care. Ann Reynolds is a faculty associate and assistant director of the University of Wisconsin Center for Cooperatives. She teaches a course on cooperatives and develops courses, conferences, and educational programs at the center. She has led numerous workshops on board leadership, board roles and responsibilities, and strategic planning. Anne is currently researching cooperative governance, behavior, and performance as part of the center's cooperative business study. Her areas of interest include governance, member loyalty, business structure, and innovative uses of the cooperative model. She has worked with cooperatives in all sectors, including agriculture, food, energy, purchasing, and worker-owned. Anne serves on several boards, including the Cooperative Foundation. Before joining the Center for Cooperatives, she worked at the Credit Union National Association.
Hi, thank you. I'm glad to be here, and I will be relatively brief because I'm actually was working with a student who did the case study on cooperative care, which is located in rural Wisconsin, and she wasn't able to be here, and so there was a little bit of a mix-up, and I'm pinch hitting for her, but I'm happy to share their story because I was part of the at least at times either deeply into or on the periphery of the beginning of this cooperative, and just last week heard the manager and the board president tell their stories. So I feel like I'm a little bit primed for this discussion. We're all three of us presenting on very low wage working opportunities, mostly for women, as has been said. And there are tremendous challenges associated with cooperatives or any kinds of businesses in this area. One of the fascinating things that I heard last week is that although cooperative care, and I think you saw HCA, have struggled with profitability in 2011, mostly because of the tremendous changes in the way benefits flow down from the federal to the state government and then to the workers. The opportunity to franchise a direct care business is a very fast-growing industry. So if any of you want to, be a direct care magnate or, own a for-profit direct care business, apparently there is money to be made in this field. And you know where that money is being made. It's definitely taking money out of the pockets of the workers and putting it into the hands of the owners. And so cooperative care like HCA and cooperative home care associates in the Bronx are efforts to change that paradigm a little bit. And actually quite significantly in many ways, because these are worker-owned cooperatives, unfortunately the wages has been a very hard paradigm to change. So a little bit about I'm going to talk a little bit about the development and then some of the challenges and opportunities that they currently have. Cooperative care, as I said, is in Wautoma, Wisconsin. It's a town of 1,500, about 2 hours north of Madison. It's definitely in reality in Wisconsin. If you heard our mayor talk about Dane County being surrounded by reality, this is reality. Average family income in that county is $19,000 to $20,000 a year. So it's a very old county. It's the future. So many people over 65 with very little income. And so home care is something that they very much value. The county values it. And it was actually the county head of social services that got this cooperative going back in the late 1990s, when she was concerned about the fact that the home care workers that were being paid from Medicaid funds through the county were basically subcontractors. They were making minimum wage, and since they weren't employees, they didn't even have workman's comp. So when they were hurt, they were on their own, and none of them had health insurance. And they were all definitely living below the poverty line, unless they had a spouse who was making some money. So she was concerned, and she thought, no, this has got to change. And so because she'd heard of this cooperative home care associates in the Bronx, she gathered together some expertise in the state of Wisconsin. There was a feasibility study that was done, But this was top-down co-op development. I mean, she told the story last week that she invited all of the workers, everybody who had been part of like the little index file that the county kept to provide home care. She invited them all into a room like this, and she said, hey, you guys are now co-op members. And that's sort of how it started. And there are problems with that kind of co-op development. And some of the particular challenges in this case are that home care workers work in the home. They don't get together. And so although this was many of them, a group of women who were very experienced, very caring, they liked their jobs, they didn't know each other. So there had been no opportunities for what at this time was about 80 people, mostly women, to have developed any trust. And so suddenly they're supposed to be voting for a board of directors. They're supposed to be making decisions about benefits and who they're going to hire to manage this organization. And it was extremely challenging to make the change from being a wage worker to a member of a business. And I was lucky enough to be around, and I saw some people rise to the occasion and others not. Unfortunately, they hired a manager who was not too good. And so when the first manager of your organization proves to be problematic, but that manager's wife has been hired as a worker, you have problems. And the first major problem that they faced was when the board of directors decided that that manager needed to be let go. His wife was, of course, understandably quite upset. And, you know, we were suddenly checking the statutes about special meetings and what can members do, because there was really a move to unseat the board of directors based on the particular issues that this family had. So, you know, this is all by way of saying it's not easy. But this co-op now, 10 years later, has a reputation in the community that's very good. It's one of the largest employers actually in this county. It has managed to, in most years, raise wages well above what other home care workers are being paid. And in fact, at $9.50 an hour, well above what most people in the county are making. But they've had to withdraw their health insurance option for the workers. They've had to withdraw some of the benefits for mileage. And that, fortunately, was a group decision. So they sat down and said, how are we going to keep this business operating at a time that no longer the county, but private contractors through our changes in our state system for delivering benefits are coming to us and asking us to lower our hourly wage rate for Medicaid direct care services. How are we going to do this? And the group got together and had to make some of these hard decisions. So I think that bodes well for the future. Another really exciting thing is that this group has become involved in advocacy. And we now have an organization in Wisconsin, the Direct Care Alliance, and that is also, I think, a national organization, or they're members of a national organization. And the president of the board of Co-op Care is also the president of that organization on a state level and also on the board at a national level. So this is something, when you hear her talk about it, she says, never, never in a million years would I have dreamed that this March I'd be shaking the hands of President Obama and having my picture taken at the White House. And I'd be speaking up for my fellow workers. And so there is a really good story here. In spite of the challenges of being in a very rural, low-income community where there are very little opportunities to bring in private pay and other more lucrative clients, the way some other home care agencies are able to do, they do have some trouble attracting leadership and bringing people who are members or employees of the co-op, because at this point, out of the 60 employees, 40 of them are members. They have trouble attracting people into leadership. On the other hand, they've done some incredible things with mentoring and with trying to raise the quality of care and being able to talk about what difference does it make to have employee owners delivering health care. rather than people who are just working for a nonprofit, very hierarchical organization. So I'm concerned a bit about the gap between the general manager and the workers. I'm concerned that the general manager comes from a nonprofit paradigm and seems to be increasingly potentially imposing that paradigm on this cooperative. And I think that one of the things that Michael Swack said yet today was these one-offs are very difficult. Trying to create a 100% vertically integrated organization in rural